A lot of our borders in the mid-Norfolk garden are now starting to look a little sad and unloved, to be fair. I haven't had quite as much time to work on these as I'd normally get around to, and there's still quite a bit of cutting back to do. This poor little Dunham Massey rose, which was planted here last year, hasn't really got away particularly well. It's been overshadowed by the taller oxeye daisies and other things that have come in here. But now's a really good opportunity to try and get into this border and give it a really good tidy up by getting away all this browning off material and dieback. And just look at the fresh growth that's coming on the base of these oxeyes. If we can take these old flower spikes off now, there's still a chance during September and October that these will give us another flush of flower. This is a relatively recent planting, and stuff's not as mature as it would normally be. We've got this young Japanese anemone coming up through the geranium that's regrown since it was cut back earlier in the summer. I think this one's probably going to be a double white, but again, a little bit of a feed, tidy up, and I'm going to take the opportunity once I've gone over this border and picked everything out to try and get a top dressing on it. See if we can get some nutrients into this and give it effectively a feed to try and get the growth back and some fresh flower in this before the end of season. I've started at this end already, tidying the edges and just pulling away any dead material that we can and getting that down onto the compost up on fire heat. This is a great time of year to do this if you can get out and the weather permits. You can see the seedlings already starting to sprout in this soil, and that gives you an opportunity to see where you want these and where you don't, and also to see the health of the mature plants, which may well overwinter well here and give us a flush of flower the following year. Got two nice looking well established foxglove plants here. As a biannual, it's important to leave these in, because these will be our flowering spikes next summer. This little hollyhock plant, although it flowered this year with spikes, didn't really get going. I think it's only a young plant, and it's a little overwhelmed and overgrown again by the oxeye daisies and catmints behind it. But I'm sure that will get going. What I've got to decide is whether I want it this far forward and in this border. With the oxeye daisies, there's no real need to cut these off. Just a good grip, and they pull away really nicely from the plants. These have all dropped their seed now, so there's no need to be shaking them or retaining the seeds. As you can see, there's hundreds of them coming up. So we're just going to continue to tidy this and remove all the old flower spikes off these plants. Got a young little pair of Cicericium seeded in here. We're going to leave those. They're in quite a good position. So I'm just going to continue to work my way over these until we've got a nice tidy bed. Well, I've done some tidying up around the Dunham Massey. You can see part of what the problem is it's just been overgrown by so much of the other planting that comes up in this cottage garden. We're going to need to do a bit of remedial work here. Just want to take all this dead wood out. Anything that's died back needs to come off. And probably I'm going to leave this for a little bit longer, the rest of it. But come November, when this is finished flowering, what we'll probably do is give this a really hard prune back to probably around 3 or 4 inches each of those stems, and give it a good top dressing and feed to try and promote some healthier growth. And what we also need to do is cut back this little hardy fuchsia, which is partly to blame for why this hasn't really got going. It's just been umbrellaing it really. It's been in the shadow and the growth's not been healthy. It's got a bit of susceptibility to black spot, this one, and you can see that on the leaf here. So by opening the air up, getting the airflow better around it, giving it a good feed and some more light, hopefully going to get this into a good full rose next year, up to around 2.5 to 3 feet, covered in those pink blossoms and being something of a feature in this border rather than a little bit of an eyesore. We've just spotted these two little fellas sat in a nest perfectly happily. Mum's hatched those over the last couple of weeks, literally over our garden gate. Ted's completely oblivious, and so have the 5 Maranas and 5 other dogs that come charging through here every day. Amazing that she's raised a brood in there. They're quite well grown on. They must have had a real soaking over the last couple of days. Well, this border is now looking a lot tidier. We've removed a lot of the dyeing back material to allow some air to get to the soil. We've opened up around the Dunham Massey rows, and the old remnants of the top dressing you can still see on this border. What we're now going to do is just open the soil up a little bit using a rake or a harrow, just to let some air into that top bit of soil. And then we'll get some fresh top dressing on this. We'll go and see what we can find. I've got a good compost heap that I've got in mind where my geese have been nesting over the summer. They've been using it as a warm bed. They've been manuring it beautifully, and if it's not too fresh, then I've got some of that I think that I'm going to bring over onto here and use as a top dressing to rot down over winter. This is the little 3-prong harrow that I find so good for getting in between your plants and just opening up the soil structure where you've walked and compacted it. Just allows your top dressing into the top few inches. You don't want to go too near to any of your established or perennial plants, but it just dresses the soil nicely, opens it up, let some air get into that top couple of inches. Well, the top dressing that I've decided to go for in the end is a mixture of leaf mould, compost, some chipped bark that's been down for around 3 years now, a pile of chippings that we had from when we were doing hedging, and mixed in with that is a really good concentrated mix of wood ash. That's what the sort of white crumbly material in here is. So I'm pretty certain this is going to be pretty potash rich. It's well rotten. There were some roots coming through the wood chip pile from the trees that it was sitting around, so that's a good sign that the wood chip has rotted down enough to be used on a border. So we're going to go ahead and get this on as a top dressing now, and hopefully that's going to feed and mulch this border nicely through into the depths of winter. Well, there we go. I'm quite happy with the 20-minute job we've done here this afternoon. Just tidying that border over nicely, removing everything that needed to come away, letting some light into those plants and giving them a bit of a feed with the top dressing. That should, if we get some rain over the next few weeks that we are forecast to do, and you would expect in September here in England, the wood ash will wash down nicely in and give them a pretty rapid boost. So we'll come back and have a look at that. I'll do a follow-up shot of this in about 2 to 3 weeks and show you the results of today's tidy up.